Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the LSU Sports Insider podcast. I'm Zach Ewing, today with Reed Darcey and Toyloy TJ Brown, our basketball beat writers at The Advocate, here to talk some LSU basketball, some SEC basketball. Do want to start, of course, with best wishes, thoughts, prayers, and all of those good vibes towards anyone affected by the tragedy in New Orleans yesterday morning. So I want to open with that and Reed, I know you're from New Orleans. You were in Metairie, I guess, New Year's Day. So it probably hits close to home for you as it does for a lot of people.
Yeah, it sure does. It's been a tough 24 hours just to see all the news pouring in and following everything. It just seems like it just got worse and worse as the day went on yesterday. Just being from there and seeing just the way the city was affected by all of it, it was tough, and I think all the cliches, Zach, are true, that New Orleans is resilient. I think it's the best city in the world, and, that was true on Tuesday, and it was true when we all woke up on Wednesday, no matter what somebody tried to do to it in the meantime. So thoughts are with everyone else, everyone affected by it, and we will get through it, and, let's talk some basketball now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be insensitive when I say life goes on, but in some ways you want life to go on, right? After the point of a terrorist attack is to kind of stop life as we know it, scare us, put fear in our country. And, TJ, you're from New York, obviously. Mm-hmm. You were probably a little young for 9/11. Were you even born?
I was one.
You were one? Okay.
Yeah.
I remember I was in high school in New Mexico at the time when 9/11 happened. I was interviewed on the news before one of my high school soccer games and said, look, we played the next day, and we wanted to play. We wanted something normal in our lives because you can't just sit and watch the TV and be afraid, of what's going to happen next. You want to kind of move on. So I don't want to be insensitive, but the games are going to go on. The Sugar Bowl is in a few hours in New Orleans. For most of you listening, it may have already started. And so SEC basketball's this weekend, and so we're gonna kind of charge forward.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. Good mindset to sort of live life as a form of resistance, continue moving on.
Right, and that doesn't mean we forget, but we do move on. So
and hope everybody's safe at the Sugar Bowl today.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so SEC basketball season does start tonight, Thursday night for the women, and it starts Saturday for the men's team. Reed is our LSU women's basketball beat writer. TJ is our men's basketball beat writer. And so we got a couple of young guys who know more about LSU basketball here than pretty much anybody. So we're going to pick their brain. Kind of want to start with a quick recap of non-conference play. But before we do that, we do want to take a quick break. We're going to take our first commercial break and be back right here on the LSU Sports Insider podcast.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. Our show is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. All right, so let's kind of recap the non-conference season for these teams. We've done it a couple of times, but now that it's kind of done and dusted and we're into SEC play, we'll start with the women, Reed. They open SEC play tonight against Arkansas in Fayetteville. And obviously, this was a good team, expected to be very good throughout the season. Has anything either increased their stock or decreased their stock in your mind in the non-conference play?
I'm not sure. I think it's really tough to gauge exactly where they are right now. I think when you look at the non-conference overall, I think the right word you can describe it as is uneven. right? Because they had some good moments, right? They blew out the only ranked team they played, NC State, in the Bahamas. They've got one of the best offenses in the country. They're ranked top 5 in scoring, top 10 in shooting efficiency. So you look at them and combine that with all the talent they have. You look at them and then it's like, hey, this is one of the best teams in the country, and it's in the firm mix for the Final Four. But then there's other things that kind of give you pause when you say that, right? They really needed to get a couple breaks to steal wins from Washington and steal a win from Stanford that went to overtime. Their defense has kind of lagged behind their offense in some senses, and they've struggled with turnovers a little bit. Bob Starkey said after LSU beat UL earlier this month or last month in December, he said that he was a little bit concerned with what he saw from that game. LSU committed 17 turnovers in just the first half. But then after that, they play a couple road games. They beat Seton Hall and Illinois, Chicago, and then they come back and they play Albany at home in the first game since the Christmas break, and they fall behind by 9 points, and they fall behind by 12 points. They have to erase a lead from a team that they really should have beaten and beaten easily. So I think overall it's uneven. You see what this team is capable of given the talent and the spurts they have, but I don't think they've really put it all together yet. Played a full game, full 4 quarters, like you've wanted them to see during the non-conference. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Doesn't mean they can't go back to the Final Four like we think they can. It just means that it's going to be a little bit while before we sort of figure out exactly what this team is and where it can really go. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing we did learn is that Flau'jae Johnson is ready for her turn in the spotlight, and so is Anissa Morrow, who's like, I was looking at the stats, and I knew she was off to a good start. She's averaging 14 rebounds a game as a guard. I mean, she's a taller guard. She's 6'1", but she's having an incredible season, and it does look like the ceiling of this team is every bit as high as we thought it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Anissa, she came into the season, and she was on pace to finish top 5 in total career rebounds all time, right? Among all players ever, one of the 5 most rebounds anyone's ever grabbed. And this season, she's on pace to have set a career high in rebounding. 14 rebounds, that would be a career high if she keeps that up. She's been incredible. Double-doubles, she leads the country. She has 13 double-doubles this season. LSU's played only 15 games. And she now has 87 career double-doubles all time. That's 5th all time among all players. She'll definitely finish second. She's going to keep this up. She only needs 5 more to do that. First place is too far out of reach for her. But yeah, she's been incredible, and Flau'jae's been incredible. Look at Flau'jae's numbers. All of her averages are up, scoring, shooting, both overall and beyond from three-point range. She's doing a lot defensively, steals, blocks, assists. So she's taken a leap. I think those two are just going to carry LSU throughout these tough games, which I'm sure we'll talk about, these tough games that they'll play in conference play.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, TJ, on the men's side, expectations were obviously a lot lower. There weren't a top 10 team preseason or anything. I would say, though, LSU's probably exceeded those expectations at least, by a little bit. They've won some big games. They beat Kansas State. They beat UCF in the triple overtime game. Won their SEC ACC challenge game. Did lose kind of a tough game to SMU in their last kind of big non-conference game. But I think overall, you have to be more optimistic about this team than say people were before the season started.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if I had to say maybe a slight uptick, if they had beaten SMU, then I think it would have been more of a resounding, yes, the stock price has gone a lot higher than I would have said prior to the season. But still playing, I believe, 5 power conference teams, losing only 2 of those, that's an improvement. Last year they were 8-5 in non-conference play, which is obviously a lot lower and not what you want to see from an LSU program that's trying to be on the upward trajectory that Matt McMahon is talking about. Yeah, and I think beating UCF, that triple overtime game, that was that showed that was the most resilient that they could be, to really be down most of that game and then fighting back, having a first game starter and Corey Chess filling in for a different freshman that lost his starting spot, and he did a good job and had a clutch steal to force the first overtime, and having players just block in and figure it out. And the win against Florida State, another underrated power conference win where Florida State's known as huge, enormous team, really defensive-oriented, gets a whole lot of turnovers. And LSU has had some turnover problems, but they figured it out and didn't turn the ball over. They weren't terrified by the size. They had a 5'11" point guard going against a 6'5", 6'6" guard for Florida State, and Jordan Sears held more than his own. So, yeah, I think LSU fans should be pretty satisfied with the non-conference play. Not perfect, but I would still say mostly positive and positive and just good to see as far as progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think every LSU fan would have taken if I told you November 1st, like, this is going to be a tournament team, right? That's the goal. That's what you want to do. That marks a successful season. Anything after that is lagniappe. Now, you can't earn a tournament bid in non-conference play, but you sure can lose it. Last year, they went 8-5. They just about lost it. I mean, they had no margin for error left going into SEC play. That's not the case this year. And we're going to talk about how tough the SEC is, but you're going to have plenty of opportunities to get wins. And I think, you're at the point this conference is good enough on paper to where if you go even 8-10 in the conference, you're going to be right in that conversation in March to be a tournament team.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. 8-10 against mostly quad 1 and quad 2 teams. That's incredibly impressive. The worst team in the SEC is maybe South Carolina at this moment in time, and South Carolina is still not too far out, top 65, top 70 in the net. That's the worst team in the SEC.
Worst, yeah. 16 out of the top 75 or so, yeah.
Exactly. So LSU has a lot of opportunities, and even the great teams like the Alabamas of the world, the Tennessees of the world, Auburns of the world, they might slip up. That's not likely, but it happens. It's college basketball where anything can happen in a close back-and-forth game.
One thing about the men, Cam Carter, high hopes for this guy as a transfer from K-State, a local kid coming home. I think he's exceeded those. 16.9 points per game. He's shooting 88% from the free throw line, but also 43% from three-point range. He's become a star. And then a guy you mentioned too, Victorious Miller, who's a freshman. He's LSU's third leading scorer and kind of showed right away, like, I can be a factor in the rotation. I can be a contributor.
Yeah, to start with Cam, he's lived up to expectations and exceeded them. His big thing was, I want to be an efficient scorer and lower my turnovers. He's done both of those things, 43% from three-point land, and he's a primary scorer. That's really impressive, and he's not just shooting catch and shoots. He's getting contests. He's going a little off the dribble and a little bit on Victorious Miller, even though he's still come off the bench and maybe may not be seen as a top player because he plays that six-man role. He's probably the most talented shot maker that LSU has as far as going off the dribble. Give me a ball screen, I'll make this mid-range. I think he's definitely the best mid-range scorer that LSU has. So the combination of those two as shooters and or scorers, that's really awesome to see. And they've proven that they can hold their own in non-conference, and that should carry over to a good amount in the conference play.
Yeah, Cam Carter shooting 43% from three-point range. That's huge, not only for the floor of this LSU team, I think for the ceiling as well. TJ, we were talking about before we went on air how they want to be a better shooting team. He has to maintain that. You want him to stay around 40% or so from three. It's something Matt Mann talked about all offseason about how he wanted Cam Carter to be more efficient overall and from three-point range, and he's exceeded those expectations. And having that high-level three-point shooter is just going to help this team be in some games that they wouldn't have otherwise been without it.
Yeah, the LSU at this moment in time, I think, is averaging 32% from three, 32.5, 0.6. That's definitely not Cam Carter's fault. He's shooting to 40%. Jordan Sears is around 38, 37%, and went down a little bit. So it's really the role players that need to pick up their three-point shooting mark, and it's hard to do that when you start two traditional big men and Damian Collins and Corey Chess that aren't known as prolific shooters. Maybe look out for Curtis Givens. He's a backup point guard. He's a better shooter, way better shooter than what his numbers show. He's shooting really below 25% if I had to round ball estimate what it is at this moment in time. And also Victorious Miller got off to a little cold shooting start. He's picked it up. He's been always making his mid-range, but the three-point number is going to start ticking up, I think.
Yeah, to me, that's a real key because you're into the SEC now. Well, not that they haven't seen any good defenses so far, but every night you're going to see there's so many defenses with physicality, with length. They're going to shut down Cam Carter and Sears. I mean, they're going to make somebody else beat them. So somebody else is going to have to step up and do that a lot of nights. So, okay, that's the men. Obviously, a lot of star power at LSU, and that's our star player segment, proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. And really, we're talking there about Cam Carter on the offensive side, Anissa Morrow, especially Flau'jae Johnson on the women's side. That's the offensive side, men's side. And Flau'jae and Anissa on the women's side. So lots of star power. One bit of good news, and we want to do our injury report brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. No real new injuries. We talked about Jalen Reed the last time TJ, like out for the season, which is a big blow to LSU, and they've had to adjust some of their rotations and things. But at least since then, everybody's back, and they've even added a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Jalen Reed's injury is still sealed. You see the residual effects of it. When it comes to the front court rotation, Jalen Reed was the starting center. They obviously had to have a new starting center, and they have Damon Collins play that role, and they moved Robert Miller to be the backup center instead of the backup, maybe third string forward, power forward. So, yeah, they had made their adjustments. They lost the SMU game, which wasn't great, but they had won other impressive games without Jalen Reed. The Florida State one is the one that he got hurt in the first 2 minutes, and they pulled that one off. Another thing that's really good is Noah Boyd, the 7-footer from McCook College in Nebraska, the junior college transfer up. He's a 7-footer that came back from an ACL injury in December. He's coming back slowly, but he had 6 points in garbage time against a mid-major school, but still 6 points in about 5 minutes from your 7-footer. That's just now getting his legs back underneath him. That's really good. And again, the front court rotation without Jalen Reed, they can use all the bodies they can. And a 7-footer to add to the mix, you can't really complain.
And really good to get him back before SEC play and kind of get his feet wet and his legs warm a little bit. So, and then on the ladies' side, Reed, really no problems on the injury front. Knock on wood.
No, nothing really. I mean, it's been kind of a tough go with it, I guess, if you look at the backcourt, because LSU has really only had their full allotment of scholarship players available for 5 games, I think, this season. You had Miracle Shepherd, the guard, comes off the bench. She missed the first 7 or so games of the season. And then once she came back, they played about 3 games with her. And then Cheyenne Day Wilson, the player who started at point guard most of the time, she tweaked her ankle in LSU's game against Stanford. So now they're fully back. Cheyenne Day Wilson missed a few games here, but they're fully healthy. They're ready to go, and they'll need everything they have for this SEC slate.
No doubt. Today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care specialist services or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. Okay, what we're going to do is kind of flip the page now, flip the script to looking forward into SEC play. Yeah, I've kind of mentioned a few things, but really what these teams need to hone in on and improve to succeed in the Southeastern Conference. Then we'll take a break. Then we'll come back and do some predictions at the end of the show. So the keys to SEC season are going to be brought to you by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And we'll start with the women, Reed, who again open SEC play tonight at 8 o'clock in Fayetteville.
8 p.m., way too late.
Yeah, way too late for newspaper deadline purposes,
Yep.
Surely. They'll be big favorites in this one, but there are some tough teams out there. You know, of course, South Carolina, but also Texas and Oklahoma, the newcomers to the SEC, Tennessee, Kentucky. Some good teams out there. We talk about how good the SEC is in men's basketball. I think it's better in women's basketball than it has been in a few years, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, what does LSU need to do to make sure that they're competing with those top teams and competing ultimately for a championship?
Defense. I think they need to play better defense. I think if you ask Kim Mulkey, that's the first thing she'll say. Right before they broke for Christmas, she said that they didn't take pride in their defense and that they needed to do some soul searching over the holiday break. She said she wanted to be happy because it was Christmas time, but she was having a tough time doing so because they let Illinois Chicago shoot 40% from the field and hit 11 threes. So right before they broke for Christmas, she wasn't exactly in a jolly mood. After that, so I think they need to improve their defense. If you look at the numbers on a per possession basis through the non-conference slate, they've given up more points than they ever have under Kim Mulkey, about 75 or so on per 100 possessions. So that number needs to come down a little bit because everything that this team does and everything it's built to do starts on the defensive end of the floor. Their offense has struggled at times to score in the half court this season, but it's really thrived in transition. And in order to get your transition offense going, you have to get stops on the defensive end of the floor. You can't be pulling the ball out of the net and taking it out of bounds and initiating your possessions that way. You have to get rebounds and run, right? That's what they want to do. So in order for them to be the best version of themselves offensively, they have to be getting stops consistently. And this season they haven't done that quite as well as they have in the past. So I think you want to see them get better defensively, hold teams under 40% from the field. And if they do that through the first 2 or 3 games of SEC play, then that's a sign that they've gotten better defensively.
Yeah, I think that's maybe why they've been so streaky, because if you're relying on transition so much,
Yes.
then all of a sudden you stop getting stops, and then your offense shuts down at the same time. So, the defense isn't good. Kim Mulkey ain't happy, and if Kim Mulkey ain't happy, as we know, ain't nobody happy.
Right.
Not around that program. So that's a key for the LSU women. On the men's side, TJ, if you look at their KenPom page, there's a lot of green numbers and some neutral numbers, and then there's kind of one sore thumb sticking out, and that is their offensive rebounding, or defensive rebounding. KenPom frames it as offensive rebounding percentage for the opponent, but it's really your defensive rebounding percentage. It's not good. They're giving up too many second opportunities. Can they fix that? What do they do to fix that?
Yeah, so like you said, the defensive rebounding is by far their biggest weakness on the team. And that's another effect of Jalen Reed being out due to injury. He's 6'10", 240, which doesn't sound huge, but compared to a 6'8", 220-pound redshirt freshman in Corey Chess and a 6'9", 215 on a generous night in Damian Collins, a 240 big man that can box out well and can grab boards and is physical as a junior, that's important to have. As far as his fixability, it's not really fixable in the sense of you're not going to add weight to those players that aren't great rebounders. Corey Chess is a phenomenal rebounder, but a redshirt freshman at 20 years old can only do so much by himself. So it's really more of a group effort that comes from the guards as well, who are going to have to crash the glass. So Cam Carter, who is as great a shooter as he is and scorer, he's going to have to average 4 or 5 rebounds. Jai Bailey, a 6'5" wing, 6'5" guard. He has to go and put his nose in there. I believe right now he's the 3rd leading rebounder for the team. You would hope that Damian Collins can improve a little bit. That's his biggest weakness in terms of traditional big man things. He's a great offensive rebounder, great instincts on that end, but defensive rebounding is just where he falls a little bit short at times. I think McMahon knows this. He's been known this even before Jalen Reed was out, and I think he's just going to have to keep on emphasizing it over and over and over again to box out group effort. If it's not a clean one jump and 2-hand rebound, tap it over to someone else that's open. They may have a chance with Noah Boyd if he earns his spot and earns maybe a rotation role and outplays maybe a Robert Miller, who's a freshman that lost his starting spot. Maybe he can be a surprise rebounder for them. But right now, my hunch is that it has to just be a group effort, and it may not be they're going to be an elite rebounding team, but more of we can make it work good enough just so we can get our offense going, because they're a great defensive team as far as rim protecting and putting pressure. It's just that they have to stop the offensive rebounds.
Yeah, I mean, you can survive not being a great rebounding team if you're good in other areas, and LSU is. But, man, there's something frustrating, as fans know, about watching your team put 30 seconds of great D in, and then the ball just bounces right back to the other team, and you got to do it all over again. You give up a second chance bucket. It can be like demoralizing for momentum.
Yeah, and the margin of error, especially in the SEC, is very slim. So if you give 8 second chance points, that could decide the game, rather than against a mid-major team or even a team like SMU, where they really lost that game because of turnovers. That was a winnable game against SMU. They turned it over 11 times in the first 12 minutes of the second half. Where the rebounding battle, they didn't really lose it that badly. And SMU has a 7'2" freshman that's really big, very terrifying as far as a paint presence, and they didn't get dominated because of his size and his rebounding ability. So margin of error is very slim, and they have to not give up too many offensive boards for opponents in SEC play.
Yeah, rebounding is a part of defense, right? And just you talk about the collective rebounding. I think the women are going through something similar. Losing Angel Reese, one of the best rebounders ever. There's no way you can just replace her production with one player, right? Everybody knows the line from Moneyball. I think LSU women want to replace Angel Reese in the aggregate, in terms of rebounding, and so I think that's what they'll try to do. Obviously, the men can do a little bit better job of that as well.
Yeah, it's the hidden possessions, right? Like if basketball was everybody just gets one shot and then it's the other team's ball, I think LSU's men's team would be really pretty good. Their shooting percentages are pretty good. Their defensive shooting percentages are really good.
Great.
But it's those hidden possessions when you give the other team extra possessions via the rebounds or the turnovers. That's where they have gotten into trouble in their couple of losses. So we'll see what happens. LSU men open with Vandy on Saturday, which to me is a crucial game.
Yep.
And that's going to kind of transition us into talking about the SEC at large. But first, I want to let you know, Tiger fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. We're going to turn this discussion into the SEC at large, make some predictions both for LSU's conference record and for our top finishers in the league race when we come back right after this.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love, gave me love.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit ClassicIndustrial.com for more information.
Welcome back to the show. Previewing SEC basketball for both the men's and women's team at LSU. Zach Ewing along with Reed Darcey and TJ Brown. Reminder to subscribe to the LSU Tiger Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. We just went over 4,000 subscribers. It actually happened like 5 minutes before midnight, which was pretty cool to get it before the end of 2024. So continue to subscribe. We grow every day. Tell your friends about us. We got 2 shows a week coming for you guys, basically all the way through the end of baseball season. So we might cut it down a little bit in the summertime, but 2 shows a week for the rest of the year. Also slip in some basketball postgame shows and the like as need arises. So real quick, want to do our sports betting segment. It's brought to you by the Queen of Baton Rouge. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. LSU women, as mentioned a couple times, they open up at Arkansas tonight in SEC play. They are 22.5-point favorites. So you're going to see a lot of this from LSU. When they play teams in the bottom half of the conference, Reed, they're going to be expected to win and win big.
On the men's side, every team is good, right? On the women's side, there's about 7 or 8 teams that are really good, and then there's a drop-off, right? So Arkansas is one of those teams. They're around 500 right now. That's one of those drop-offs. But I do think the conference, like you mentioned earlier, Zach, is as good as it's been in a really long time. So are we doing the predictions now? Or
No. We'll wait. We're
okay,
just,
cool. Yeah, so it's
Don't spoil it.
It's a tough conference. I'm glad I asked. It's a tough conference. 8 SEC teams are ranked in the AP poll right now. Last year at this time, there were only 2, LSU and South Carolina. And the year before that, there were only 3. The year before that, there were 6. But think about it. You know, if in this edition of the AP poll, there are more teams, SEC teams ranked in it now than there were over the last 2 years combined at the same point of the year. So the SEC is a lot tougher. LSU will play South Carolina again, but they'll also get tough tests from Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt. You know, the list goes on. So I think LSU, they're going to have, they want to host tournament games. That's their goal. It always is their goal. That path to getting there, to hosting tournament games, it hasn't been tougher than it is right now ever since Kim Mulkey took over the program.
Yeah. You need to be a top 4 seed to do that. On the men's side, no betting line out for the LSU Vandy game yet. Probably come out tomorrow. But if you look at Ken Palm, they have LSU winning that game by 3 points. So again, without giving away your prediction, TJ, this one's big because it's kind of LSU's in the opposite side of the boat on the men's side. They are one of the bottom teams, at least if you look at Ken Palm rankings if you look at preseason projections, things like that. And when you play the Auburns and the Tennessees and the Alabamas, you can't expect to win even most of those games. You'd love to pick off a couple of them here and there, but the ones you got to win are when you play other teams kind of down, also picked toward the bottom, like the Vandies. And then I think they play Missouri next week as well, and that's another one. Like, those are the ones, boy, if you can win all of those games, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, these first 2 games are crucial. They're arguably more important than when they play these tough Tennessee games and Auburns, because you expect LSU to put up a fight, of course, but it's going to be a tough sledding to get a W over those teams consistently. And in the SEC conference, that's this elite, littered with AP teams, littered with teams in the top 10, undefeated teams still that have played tough schedules like Florida and Tennessee. Yeah, you have to win these winnable games that are against a Vanderbilt team that's pretty close to evenly matched. And LSU's at home as well, so even more of an emphasis why they should be able to, let's pull this one out and just get off on the right foot.
Yeah, you all of a sudden you lose a couple of those games, and then you're like 1-3 and staring at a game against Auburn or Alabama in the like that's when things snowball on you the wrong way. So they've got to prevent that. Tiger fans, you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams while enjoying a cold brew or signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. All right. Prediction time, SEC basketball style. First, we're going to hone in on LSU, then we'll look at the conference at large. Read on the women's side. If you had to predict LSU's 16-game SEC record today, the day they open SEC play, what have you got?
I will go 12-4.
Okay.
Last year they went 13-3. The year before that, when they won the title, they went 15-1. And the year before that, I think they were 13-3 as well. So I looked at it and I said, all right, so baseline, 3 losses. Given the way the schedule shook out, given how tough it is, it's going to be tough to get to 13 wins, I think. So 12 wins, I think, is more in the ballpark of what you should expect, just given the amount of talent that's in the SEC. Like you said, LSU has to play South Carolina and Texas and Oklahoma, Kentucky and Tennessee. It's going to be quite an ask to expect them to win all of those games, right? They're going to slip up, but I think 12 wins probably is enough to get them one of those top 4 seeds so they can host the first 2 rounds of the tournament. We'll just see if they can, steal a couple wins against, maybe on the road against some of the top teams in the conference.
Yeah, 13-3 2 of the last 3 years, but you're swapping games against like Auburn and Florida for games against Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah,
I mean the schedule has changed, so I would think 12-4 that puts you at 27-4 going into the SEC tournament, well in range to get one of those top 4 seeds.
And by the way, the fact that they went undefeated in the non-conference is pretty huge actually, because say they picked up a couple losses here, that would affect their tournament resume, because they're going to pick up some losses in the SEC play in the SEC slate. So the fact that they went undefeated and they swept through the non-conference, that will help them not pick up too many losses that they'll have on their resume when tournament time comes around.
Right. And we're nitpicking, right? Like we should have probably mentioned that at the top. By the way, this team's 15-0; they're undefeated.
Right.
But the expectations are so high. And I think Kim Mulkey agrees with that. They're so high that we can't just look at, hey, they're 15-0. It's how do they play? Where can they improve? All those sorts of things, because the schedule is going to get tougher.
Yep, it sure is. And the non-conference wasn't particularly tough. It's the way they schedule. They don't schedule as tough as some other teams around the conference. That's kind of just their philosophy. So we won't really figure out exactly what they're made of until they really get into the thick of SEC play.
Yeah. Okay, on the men's side, TJ, we mentioned 8-10 as that baseline. If you're 8-10 in this tough of the SEC, you combine that with the 11-2? 11-2 non-conference season. So that puts you at 19-12 going into the SEC tournament. I think you're at least in the conversation if you can get to that 8-10 mark, maybe even 7-11, but then you're probably, okay, we got to go to Nashville and win a couple of games. So 8-10 is the goal. Do you think LSU gets there? What is your record prediction?
8-10 is my prediction.
Right there.
Again, cannot emphasize enough. I'm assuming that they win against Vanderbilt and Missouri. So that goes to tell you that they're going to lose a lot of these tough games, or that's what my leanings are when they go play against Auburn, even Tennessee at home. which they may. Tennessee's an incredibly good defensive team, and even though LSU may have the home advantage, that's gonna be a tough game. And these teams that they're playing, they're not just awesome teams, but they're contenders. Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky. So 8-10 doesn't sound the greatest, but that's enough in this type of SEC competition. And LSU can do it. LSU, they're a team that if they are able to get those rebounds that we talked about and push the pace a little bit, their offense is not bad. Things when they get issues is when they put self-inflicted wounds with turnovers or if not cleaning up the glass. Offensively, we talked about the Cam Carters of the world. He's as good of a shooter, not the greatest shooter in the SEC. I think he's a top 8-7 shooter in the SEC, which is really good to have. And Victorious Miller, he's an impressive freshman as well. And LSU has a lot of good shot blocking. So they have reasons to feel good about, hey, we may not be the biggest and the best rebounding team, but we have things that opponents in the SEC play may have fear of, and we can pull out 8 wins out of these 18 games.
When you look at bracketology on the men's side, everybody always mentions Joe Lunardi. Joe Lunardi is like one of the least accurate bracketologists if you look at the people who track these things, but he's the one everybody talks about.
Yeah.
I think he had 13 SEC teams in his latest field, and then he had another one, I want to say it was Missouri, as like one of the first 4 out. So that's 14 of the 16. LSU is not one of those 14.
On the bubble.
They're on the bubble. They've got to get some wins, and they've got the opportunity to do that. But the flip side of that is all of these other teams, the Vanderbilt is looking at this game Saturday night saying, hey, this is an opportunity for us to get a win that we need because they're trying to get to 8-10 too. And not everybody's going to do it. So if you get to 8-10, that's a pretty good achievement in this league.
Yeah, no, it's great. And again, 8-10, it doesn't sound like a record you'll go and brag to your parents and go to the family reunion about. But 8-10 in this type of elite competition, it's incredible. And a big part of it that I'm also making, I think Matt McMahon will make some moves. I think what we see now as far as rotations, as far as who may even be in the starting lineup, even though I think it's most likely that things remain the same with Damian Collins, Corey Chuss, Jai Bailey, Jordan Sears, and Cam Carter. If Victorious Miller got it going, averaging 16, 17 points per game, who knows that they may run a little bit bigger in the guard lineup instead of running things that they have at this moment in time. So I'm banking in that if there's some issues, I think McMahon will make some adjustments.
All right. It's time to go around the SEC and do our SEC predictions with Classic Industrial Services, because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. And as we know in the SEC, it just means more. Slogans fit with each other. Women's side, Reed. I think we've got the top 4 on the screen here of your picks. Mm-hmm. You went South Carolina number 1, no surprise. I mean, we don't want to be like chalk, but with the Gamecocks, like you gotta tip your cap and say they're the favorite.
They still run the show. Until further notice. They slipped up this year. They lost to UCLA, who's now the number 1 team in the country. But after that, they played a really tough schedule. They played, I think, a stretch of like 5 power conference teams or so, and they won all of them. They swept through all of them. So I think they're just fine. I think in the SEC, there's probably 4 clear-cut Tier 1 teams, and that's South Carolina, LSU, Texas, and Oklahoma. I believe I predicted that Texas would finish above LSU, just because Texas has that home game against LSU, so they'll probably have that head-to-head. Yeah, those 4 teams, it's probably South Carolina and then the 3 others. I think that's the top tier. And then after that, you get into the next tier of teams. You got Tennessee, Kentucky. I believe I said Alabama next.
You said Tennessee 5, Kentucky 6.
Okay, yeah, Tennessee, Kentucky, and then Alabama, Ole Miss. I think that's how it'll shake out. I think probably those top 4 teams are going to be contending for a top 4 regional seed once March rolls around.
If one of those top 4 should slip and fall into the second tier, who is it?
Tennessee. I'm really impressed by Tennessee. I think their new coach, Kim Caldwell, she's done a really good job. I think they play a style of offense that's really difficult to guard. It's very fast-paced. It's very spread out. They shoot a lot of threes. And this was the craziest stat, I think, of the entire non-conference slate across the country. In one game, I think it was against NC Central. Tennessee was at home. They hit 33 pointers, Zach. 30.
That's the game where they scored like 140-something points.
They scored. they hit 33 pointers. No college basketball team has ever done that on the men's side or the women's side. No NBA team has done that.
Just do the math. That's 90 points just from threes.
No NBA team, no WNBA team has done that ever. So So that was just crazy impressive, and it just speaks to how dangerous their offense can be if they're hot. They won't hit 30 again,
That's not everyday thing.
But they can stretch you out, space you out, and hit threes, and that poses trouble for a team like LSU that wants to play more in the paint.
Okay, if Tennessee does jump into that top 4, who's most vulnerable among South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU? Who do you think could fall out of that range?
I need to see more from Oklahoma, I think. They've got, they're new to the league. They've got a new top player, Reagan Beers. She's fit in really well with them. They like to play fast, and she really anchors them down low. I think, probably among that group, they probably have the least amount of talent and star power. So I think if they kind of slip up a little bit, they could fall out. I need to see more from them until I really put them on the same level, I think, as Texas and LSU, because Texas and LSU have as much talent as any team in the country, those two.
All right. So. That is the women's side. On SEC basketball race. On the men's side, TJ, this is difficult to pick a top 6. We have your top 4 on the screen right now. How did you go?
Yeah, so I see Tennessee. Right now they're still undefeated, and it's a toss-up. Auburn's obviously really good. I think they still are number 1 in Ken Pom and net. I just feel that maybe Tennessee's defense will, and also when SEC play really gets going, those numbers will sort of adjust. Yeah, I really love how Tennessee plays. They're very physical, very rough. They have, I think, the best shooter, not just in SEC play, but one of the best shooters in the country in Chaz Lanier, who is hard to stop, super consistent. They have size, they have skill. Sakai Ziegler is a really good floor general, very reliable, super experienced, seen it all, been there, done that, even at just 5'10", 5'9". So yeah, that's why I have number 1 Auburn. Like I said, they're number 1 analytically in all the places that you can find. They don't have many glaring weaknesses. They played a really tough non-conference, so I think they're really battle tested. I have Alabama, I believe, number 3. Alabama's super talented. They haven't had. I think they still haven't had Chris Youngblood, who was a player that people had a lot of high hopes for that transferred in, but they found it. They figured out with Mark Sears and a lot of the freshmen play, LeBaron Philon. They have a lot of talent, and offensively, it's hard to find a better offensively in terms of skill sets, more loaded roster with just offensive talents. Grant Nelson's another one that people may remember from the tournament. Yeah, I believe number 4. Who do I have number 4, you said?
Kentucky, number 4.
Yeah, Kentucky. Yeah. I really love how Mark Pope has his team playing. I think they dropped a couple games, but Kentucky, who I believe was, I think at one point number 1 in the AP poll, incredibly impressed with just the offensive system. A team full of transfers, no continuity, but they just have really complementary pieces from their big men to their guards. They play together, and Mark Pope, I'm really in love with how he plays and coaches basketball, and it's really impressive that in his first year he has Kentucky with a whole new roster that's just this much in rhythm and clicking. I think they're right now 10 or 11 in the AP poll.
And then you added, like, this is how loaded this conference is. Just another illustration. You picked top 4, legit top 4. All 4 could finish the country in the top 5 in the country, in the Final Four, all those things. And you don't even mention a couple of undefeated teams, Florida and Oklahoma. And then you have Florida 5th, Texas A&M 6th, who's also been very good. Mississippi State's 11-1. We didn't mention them. The list goes on. You've got, this conference goes 10 deep in teams that I think could be Final Four teams. Yeah,
and what's incredible is that we see in the tournament a couple of things that always have success is guard play, which SEC is loaded with lead guards that are really impressive and skilled. Texas A&M, who have 6. Wade Taylor's really gifted guard, really experienced. A little bit smaller, but 16 points per game, can do it all. But another thing is defense. SEC is loaded with incredibly physical defenses. That's why Florida is still undefeated. Oklahoma, who a lot of people had, I think even below LSU in the preseason SEC poll, they've been really impressive. The Michigan one was incredible. LSU, again, they have really tough competition, and these teams are at a little bit different echelon as far as their talent and also just what kind of what they've proven so far in the non-conference play. Yeah, we didn't even mention John Calipari's annual collection of talent at Arkansas this year. I mean, it's loaded, and when I say 10 teams could make the Final Four, it's not going to end up that way. Obviously, somebody's going to have injury problems. Somebody is going to have trouble gelling or whatever it is, or somebody's going to go into a shooting slump, and a shooting slump could cost you 5 straight losses in this league. I mean, so somebody will end up having a bad season out of that group, at least by what we expect. But the point is, and Reed, this goes to the women's side too,
the SEC is as good in basketball on both men's and women's side as it probably has ever been. And that has more to do than just the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. These teams are getting better. The conference has emphasized basketball and is paying off.
Yeah, I think if you're listening carefully, you're sensing a theme that we're talking about here is that the SEC is really good and that there's a lot of good teams, a lot of talent on both sides of the coin in the SEC. And so I think for both programs, the men and the women, for them to accomplish their respective goals, it's been a while since it's been this difficult for either team to get there. So the next 2-3 months are going to be pretty interesting. You're going to have a lot of fun games. I think you're going to have a lot of close games. You're going to have a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And so, we'll be there throughout the rest of it. We'll do more podcasts and we'll cover it all, and we'll be there. And this is TJ's first crack at it. So we'll be excited to see what he comes up with over the next couple of months. And yeah, we'll just we'll be talking about it, and we'll probably sound like a broken record at the more podcasts we do.
Guess what? LSU's got 2 tough games this week.
Yeah. No, I picked a heck of a first year to cover SEC basketball. It's gonna be very exciting, and I would caution fans to not, if there's a blowout game, like a blowout loss for LSU men's or women's. Again, like, this is a loaded team, a loaded conference. Excuse me, and yeah, if there's a cold shooting night, LSU right now, men's is shooting 32% from 3, but they shoot 45% on one night, on one occasion, then that's how you get an upset, and vice versa as far as what can happen for women's if that happens. But yeah, no, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of ups and downs. You want to stay even keel, all that kind of stuff. And what you want to avoid is the snowball, right? Like, every win is so valuable. So celebrate every win. Try to avoid the 4 and 5 game losing streaks, because that's on the men's side. On the women's side, we don't anticipate that happening. But avoid those, and you'll probably be okay at the end of the SEC season. So, as Reed said, we're going to be back with more basketball podcasts as we go through conference season. You can join us every step of the way on the LSU Sports Insider. Subscribe to the LSU Tigers on NOLA.com YouTube channel. It's right down below. Hit the like button while you're there. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a 5-star review. We surely appreciate that. Today's episode of LSU Insider was brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States with high-quality scaffolding erection and rental services, thermal insulation services, refractory services, and much more. From large capital projects to commercial projects, or your smaller quick response needs, Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business, they're a proud community partner, supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. Because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Our thanks today to our producer, Amelia Cotton, Reed Darcey, our advocate women's basketball writer for LSU, and TJ Brown, our men's basketball beat writer. Both do a great job. You can read their work at theadvocate.com/LSU. I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks most of all to you watching, and we'll see you next time on the LSU Sports Insider.